So, as a consequence, if the repair mechanism is missing, it kills the organism and the evolution. Evolution needs the mutations, but the repair mechanism removes the mutations. If you remove the repair mechanism so you have the mutations kill the organism and kills evolution along with it. You can't win for losing. In either case, the repair system stops evolution, whether it's there or whether it's not there. Evolution is flat out impossible, biologically speaking. Now, again, coming back to my main point, time is not the hero of the plot, it's the enemy of the plot. In this case, the whole point of Jonathan Sanford's book, Genetic Entropy, is this. The genetic code within the human population is deteriorating. Unfortunately, I got bad news for you. You inherited genetic errors from your parents. When you have children, you are going to pass on genetic errors to your children. In the meantime, your parents gave you genetic errors. While you were alive, you collected genetic errors. These aren't fixed, and they are passed on to your children. The genetic errors accumulate over time. It's slowly, but when you're talking millions of years, it is absolutely a problem for evolution. If evolution has been going on for millions of years, we should have been dead 1,000 times over. And that was actually part of the title of an article written by an evolutionary biologist who saw this problem and said, I believe the name of the title, if I recall correctly, was, "Why Aren't We Dead 1,000 Times Over?" We have not had enough time for evolution, and if we did, we should be dead. Evolution not only cannot plug the holes in the bottom of the boat to explain how the holes were plugged, it can't even explain where the boat came from in the first place. Yes, sir?
How are the errors collected in our lifetime?
Okay, it's, there are, that'd be a technical question for the biologists, I'm afraid. I'm not even going to try and answer that one. They do collect over time. That's a well-acknowledged fact. Everybody acknowledges that. The question was how quickly do they collect, and that's what's only come out in the past few years, and that's been the surprise, is how quickly they're accumulating, how many are accumulating. Yes?
I assume, though, that mechanism is also true in plants and animals?
Yes. Yes, it's the same in all organic life. Okay, and I think, oh yes, last thing. See, I have to put notes to myself or I forget. So this is the last thing I'll talk about today. Evolution claims that everything came from a common ancestor, a common life. We had the first cells in the prebiotic soup, which gave rise to the first marine animals. And from there, basically, fish evolved into amphibians, which evolved into land animals, which evolved into birds, crocodiles, etc. Now, when we take a look at the cardiovascular system, we'll notice that major changes have to take place. Now, this is a model of a fish heart. Now, when I use the term simple, please understand I'm using that term very loosely, okay? There's nothing simple about any heart, even the simple fish heart. But it's simpler than ours, and it's because it doesn't need to be more complex. A fish has simply two chambers. The low-pressure blood comes in and gets pumped by a high-pressure blood vessel, first to the gills, then to the body, then returns to the heart. It only has a two-chamber heart because it can get away with it. A fish heart is well designed for a fish. You, however, cannot pump high-pressure blood to your lungs because if you did, you would burst the very fine blood vessels in your lungs and you would drown on your own blood. Now, here's the thing. How come a fish can pump high-pressure blood straight to its gills? Why? Can you figure it out? Because they're in water. They're living underwater, and the back pressure from the water enables them to pump high-pressure blood into their gills without bursting the fine blood vessels, and they still get fine oxygen, or still get a good oxygen exchange through the thin walls of the blood vessels. So a fish can get away with this. Now, the next stage up is the frog heart. Now, the frog heart has a number of very interesting features about it. First of all, it tends to mix blood because it breathes both through its lungs and its skin. And so you get two different types of blood that come through. Some that has no oxygen from the body, and some that has some oxygen from the body. Now what happens is it comes through here, it makes what fluid dynamicists call laminar flow. The two types of blood come in, they don't mix because it's laminar flow. That laminar flow comes up, they go through a common valve, and then you see the squiggly valve right there, the yellow squiggly valve. That's the technical term, squiggly valve, okay? Okay. The squiggly valve still keeps them separated and directs them to their appropriate place. The oxygen, the blood that has no oxygen goes to the lungs. The blood that has some oxygen mixes with the blood that is getting oxygen and sends it to the body. So a frog, again, has a 3-chambered heart. Again, unique. It's well designed for the frog. Wouldn't work on us, wouldn't work on a fish, but it works well in a frog. Now, the crocodile is another nifty little creature. The crocodile heart is a 4-chambered heart, much like yours, except it has a couple of interesting features. That valve right there actually has cogged teeth on it. So the two valves actually lock together. And it can actually close off the blood flow to its lungs completely. Why would it want to do that? Any guesses? I hear some mumbling, but no one wants to be brave enough? Okay. It'll plug blood flow off to its lungs and enables it to stay underwater, I've been told, up to 2 hours underwater. It can hold its breath, but holding its breath is not good enough, because then you will actually rob oxygen out of your blood going into your lungs, unless you plug off the blood flow. See, a crocodile heart is well designed for a crocodile. It works very well for them. Now, an amazing thing happens with humans at birth. Now, while you were developing in your mother's womb, there was 2 unique features about your heart. The first is this blood vessel right here. I'll show this to the camera. It connects the 2 major arteries coming out of the heart, connects them together and allows blood transfer between them. The reason is because while you were developing in your mother's womb, you do not use your lungs. You get your oxygen from your mother. And so the one side of the heart, the low pressure side of the heart, is normally for pumping blood to the lungs. That's why you have a 2-sided heart. One side is low pressure, pumps blood exclusively to the lungs, sends it back to the heart, which then pumps it under high pressure to the rest of your body so you can get out to your extremities. Now, this allows both sides of the heart to work in tandem while you are developing, because the heart is a muscle, and like any other muscle, it develops by use. And so God did a little bit of replumbing to the fetus while it's developing. That blood vessel is one of them that connects the 2 sides there, and on the back, you'll notice this door is open. And that door remains open until you are born. So both sides of the heart work in tandem, and that allows the heart to develop while it's not sending blood to the lungs. Now, here's what happens at birth. When you were born, the doctor gives you your first well-deserved spanking. You deserved it. Okay? You start crying and you start using your lungs. This is the first heavy dose of oxygen your body has seen. It's been found with experiments that this blood vessel right here is actually made of a different material than the rest of the blood vessels. And guess what it does when it sees oxygen? It shrinks. It shrivels up and it will actually heal closed. Okay? That deals with that. You now have 2 sides of the heart here. However, this door on the back is actually open to the high pressure side. So, when you first start breathing and start using your heart in a heavy beating rhythm, the high pressure side slams the door closed, and even if it never healed shut, it would remain closed. And so now when you are born, you now have 2 sides to the heart. A remarkable change takes place. Now, sadly, that brings me to my main point. Sadly, sometimes a baby is born with what they call a hole in its heart. And it can be lethal. I've had friends who've survived with it, but it's debilitating. And what happens is that door doesn't completely close. That's one hole in the heart. Now, throughout evolutionary time, we have to go through the different stages, changing not just the body, but major physiological changes like the cardiovascular system. Sadly, the school I worked at, we had one girl who died, instantly died. She had, and also my high school teacher, who was fit as a fiddle. The guy was amazing. I mean, he was built like a tank. He was out biking one day, picked up his bike, went to put it on the back of the truck, fell over backwards, absolutely dead, instantly. Why? He blew a hole in his aorta. One hole, that's all it took. It killed him. Now, we need to add holes, plumbing that goes to organs that don't exist yet, because remember, this is a fish, it doesn't have lungs. It's got to produce holes in the heart, holes in the arteries, new arteries going to organs that don't exist, and it has to do it without killing the organism. It has to work every time the first time. It is absolutely impossible for evolution to evolve through small, gradual steps from anything even vaguely resembling a fish into anything even vaguely resembling a human. It can't do it. It kills the organism, and it kills evolution along with it. Unfortunately, it's too bad we canceled things last night. I'm going to try and, if the students will be patient with me for a second, I'm just going to backtrack a little bit and repeat some of the stuff we've been talking about the past couple of days. This morning, we were seeing the incredible evidence against evolution from biology. And tomorrow we'll be talking about the fossils themselves that are presented as evidence for evolution. We're going to examine those, several of those meticulously, which, frankly, even if you have a really impressive looking fossil, who cares? You have no mechanism. Biologically speaking, evolution is absolutely impossible. Absolutely impossible. So I'm going to start by handing a couple things around tonight. This is an actual T-Rex dinosaur bone. It's part of a bone. And while I hand it around to the kids, take a close look at it, and you'll notice it looks an awful lot like a rock, doesn't it? Yeah. Well, that's just the point. It's very hard to spot dinosaur bones. You kind of got to know what you're looking for. But if you pass that around, and I have another, yeah, by the way, it's heavy. Watch it. It is a rock. And I have another fossil here, which is a nifty little creature. This is a trilobite. I'm sure many of you have heard of them before. And trilobites have an amazing eye. They actually have convex lenses built into their eyes. It's actually made out of calcite or calcium. And the lenses enable them to see clearly underwater. You guys have gone swimming underwater? You can't see very well, can you? But you can with a scuba mask, right? You know how clear you can see underwater with a scuba mask? These guys have a scuba mask built into their eyes. They can see perfectly underwater. Very slick. So I'll pass this one around too. I might as well start right here. If you guys can pass that around and share with you. I also wanted to mention Walt and Sharon are here from the Midwest Creation Fellowship. Welcome. This is a creation group operating locally in the Chicago area. What's the website? I've forgotten. Oh, gee, was that simple or what? Okay. MidwestCreationFellowship.org. There you go. So visit the website, check it out. They sponsor an essay contest, things like that every year. They've been very active for many years. How long have you been president now?
About 7 years.
Okay, because it was before I met you, and that was about 4 or 5 years ago when I first ran into you, or came across you, even though we only got to meet first personally last year, finally. But I've been corresponding, especially with Sharon now, for a good 3 or 4 years at least, and I'm not even sure how we wound up corresponding. But anyway, that is the internet for you. Okay, tonight I want to sum everything up. I'm going to backtrack a little first. There is one thing I forgot to mention. For those of you who haven't been here before, that is my website, by the way, ianjuby.org. There is one thing I did forget to mention I want to touch on. I'm a member of the Creation Research Society. And what I've been doing is plugging the society everywhere I went because they're very important to create the creation community as a whole. The website is creationresearch.org. It's an international community or society of scientists who believe in a literal young Earth creation. And the society does all kinds of research. They publish Creation Matters, which is basically the layman's version of the magazine on the right, CRSQ, which is the Creation Research Society Quarterly. And throughout these lectures, I've cited the CRSQ repeatedly because it is one of the few peer-reviewed creationist magazines out there. And they do have a research facility down in Arizona, and they do fund research, the RATE project, which I referred to repeatedly, which came up with some fantastic evidence. It was just excellent, excellent work. An 8-year project, well, the money had to come from somewhere, and CRS was one of the organizations that funded much of that research. Give you a quick example. If we need a bunch of radiometric dating methods done, or radiometric dating tests done, those tests will run anywhere from $400 to $800 a pop. And we might need 4 or 5 or 6 of those just on one rock. So it gets quite expensive in a hurry. So there is a free newsletter sign up at the back, as well as a whole pile of free newsletters, Creation Matters, on the table out in the foyer. So do sign up for the newsletter. It's completely free. Basically, Kevin Anderson, the research director down there, emphasized to me they want to have a print version of the newsletter going out. They don't want to do it by email. They prefer to do it by print so people have a letter they can pass around. So that's back there. Okay. I am off to Arizona next on Saturday. My mother insisted that I keep plugging away, doing what I'm doing. There's no point in going home. My dad's unconscious. And I've already said my goodbyes before I left because, frankly, whenever I hit the road, I don't know that I'm coming back alive. So I always go way out of my way to say goodbye to my parents before I leave, because I'll be on the road for months at a time, driving tens of thousands of miles through sometimes horrid weather. And so I make sure to say my goodbyes before I leave. And basically, there's not much I can do back home. So my mother said, if your father was awake right now, he'd say the same thing. The ministry you're doing is important. Get out there and do it. And so basically, I'm heading to Arizona next. After Arizona, I'll be speaking there for a week. Heading back over to Glen Rose, Texas, the Creation Evidence Museum. Now, I'm sure many of you recognize this guy right here, Professor M.E. Clark, Professor Emeritus of Fluid Mechanics at Champaign-Urbana, University of Illinois. And the gentleman behind is Andrew Rodenbeck, and then some strange guy from Canada joins them down there once in a while, too. We are carrying out sedimentology research. Now, what this is, that big machine there is called a flume. It's basically a rotary flume. What we do is we put a whole pile of dirt and water into this big tank, and those paddles flip down. You can see this one's in the locked down position, and these ones are in the locked up position. So what we do is we spin all the fluid and the sediments. It mixes it all up. The paddles pop out of the water, and the water settles. And what happens is we wind up making layers, just like you see in road cuts, etc. And so we're studying those layers and how they're formed, etc., etc. Now, there's been a lot of interesting surprises. In fact, I think every single time we've turned that machine on, we've gotten surprises, and they've been good surprises. For example, it's hard to see, but that is a worm that accidentally got mixed in with the dirt. It was a dead worm. And we specifically wanted mixed up sediments, so we just went down to the river and scooped a bunch up. And apparently I scooped up a dead worm in the middle of it. Well, sure enough, after one of our runs, Andrew happened to cut exactly where the worm was. And it is effectively a polystrate worm. It is upright in the sediments, and then it is bent over on the top of the mud. The reason this was interesting is because only 2 or 3 years before, during the excavations in the Paluxy Riverbed, we have to remove limestone to get to the dinosaur tracks. It turns out they fractured the limestone exactly at the right place. Personally, I think it was God's provision, again. But they fractured the limestone at precisely the right spot and happened to expose a polystrate fossil worm. In other words, it was a worm that was buried vertically in the limestone. They happened to get it just right. But that wasn't the only place I saw it. This is on display at the Royal Tyrrell Museum in Alberta, Canada. This is a display from the Burgess Shale in British Columbia. And as you can see, it was 3 polystrate worms found in the Burgess Shale. The reason this was important is because, again, these layers are supposed to take years to accumulate. So what? Did 3 worms happen to die in close proximity to each other, perfectly vertical in the sediments, and they happen to be preserved? Or did they somehow get buried? The worm that we had in the flume was dead, and it still wound up buried in the sediments vertically. So again, that was one of the many surprises. Again, you can see some of the sediments we have there and some of the layers we made. They go anywhere from 1 layer to 5 layers, thinning down to none, etc. It's a work in progress. Now, this was a small linear flume that we built, This, again, just every time we ran it, we wound up with good surprises. All we were using was a cement mixer. Any junior high school student can do this at home. It's dead simple stuff. But the implications are quite profound. Now, here we are, Professor Clark, that's Dr. Carl Baugh, taking some of the photographs of some of the sedimentary layers that are made. And that there is called cross-bedding. And we already discussed this in the previous sessions with the students. But there's Andrew washing it out. So it's not very big. The sediments and water come in this end, just go out the other end. We catch it in a basin to recycle the sediments, but let the water go out. Here's one of our experiments, for example. We just basically dumped the entire load just as fast as we could. As you can see, it makes layers. When we pulse it, every single pulse made 3 layers. You can actually see it. White, coarse, red. White, red, coarse, white, red, coarse, white, red, coarse. And every time we had a wave, it laid down 3 layers. So no, we don't make 1 layer for every wave. In this case, we made 3 layers per wave. And they sorted by density per wave, making multiple layers at once. Now, again, we covered this with the students. This is what we call cross-bedding. It's a complex structure. If you go to Zion National Monument, you see it all over the place. In fact, that's all you see. You'll also see it in the Grand Canyon. If you pay close attention, you'll see it in a lot of rock cuts as well. You can see layer upon layer. There's a layer, there's a layer, there's a layer, there's another layer. But within those layers, you have these angled beds. They're called cross beds. The cross bed is composed of 3 different portions. It's got a top curve bending down to the slope, which is called the top set. Then the foreset, which is the angled bed itself. Then the bottom curve, which levels out to the next layer. So that's a cross bed. Now, we ran some experiments with the flume. Our small flume, we were able to tilt uphill 2 degrees. That's all we did. And look what happened. Recognize it? All we did was put our flow going uphill, and we produced cross beds. Why? Well, it's simple. The water got trapped ahead and became standing water. The secret is moving water coming in from the left, hitting standing water. The moving water is going fast enough to carry dirt. When it hits the standing water, it comes to a stop. It is no longer moving fast enough to carry this dirt and drops it just like a conveyor belt. And it just continually builds up and builds up these dramatic cross beds. And we did some other experiments with newts and stuff. So anyway, this is where I'm off to next. We have now built a much larger flume. We have converted the big rotary flume into the world's largest mixmaster. We'll nicknamed it the Binford 9000. And basically what we do there is we put all the sediments and water into there, we open a door there, and it comes through this flume, and we study it. And again, just in constructing it and doing the test runs, we wound up with all kinds of surprises. It was a lot of fun. So that's where I'm off to next. That's what we're doing next. It's huge. Why is everything so much bigger? Really unusual. Now, another thing we touched on again, which I'll repeat again tonight, for those of you who missed it, this comes out of the book called The Energy Non-Crisis by Lindsay Williams. And he's talking about Prudhoe Bay and the North Shore of Alaska. This is way up in the Arctic, about as high north as you can get. Get a load of what he said. There's an interesting point to mention in passing. Though the ground is frozen for 1,900 feet down from the surface of Prudhoe Bay, that's a lot of permafrost. Everywhere the oil companies drilled around this area, they discovered an ancient tropical forest. It was in a frozen state, not in a petrified state. It is between 1,100 and 1,700 feet down. There are palm trees, pine trees, and tropical foliage in great profusion. In fact, they found them lapped all over each other, just as though they had fallen in that position. It is interesting to notice that tropical ferns have also been found at the Antarctic. And the evidence from these 2 areas, considered together, certainly suggests that there has been a dramatic change from a worldwide tropical climate to an Arctic climate within datable times. It is also interesting to remember that the great Arctic explorer Admiral Byrd reported seeing tropical growth in near Arctic regions. And again, we find things like scorpion fossil footprints in Ellesmere Island in the Canadian high Arctic. We find the giant armadillo like Liptodon, which doesn't float very well, hates the cold, but yet we find them in the Antarctic. What on earth has gone on in Earth's history to cause all this. So I'm going to try and sum all this up together. In a model that's been put together by the kind folks at Creation Evidence Museum, I think they're really onto something. There are questions remaining, there are challenges remaining, and I agree that there are some still things that we still need to answer, questions that still need to be answered, research that still needs to be done. However, I'm going to show you why I think they're onto something. Now, in Genesis chapter 1, verse 6 through 9, it says some very unusual statements. God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the water, let it divide the waters from the waters." God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. A couple loaded statements here that I'm going to address tonight. Number one, this firmament, whatever it is, was apparently in the sky, apparently made up of water, and the waters under heaven were apparently gathered together into one place. I'm going to come back to that, so remember that, all right? That'll be in the second half of this evening's session. Now, what they've proposed, when you take a look at the original Hebrew word for firmament, the word they use there is rakia. Has very strange implications. It literally translated means to pound together into thin sheets of metal and stretch across the arch of heaven. Wait a minute. Something solid in a crystalline structure made out of water in the heavens? Something doesn't stack up here. However, it is true that at least some of the elements of water, such as hydrogen, can take on a metallic state. So here's what has now transpired. This is at the Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas. This is the world's first hyperbaric biosphere. Within it, they're attempting to simulate the world as they see it from before the flood. So it's a pressure chamber, 2 atmospheres of pressure, increased electromagnetic field, 24/7 pink light. You can see the pink filters in the windows. The lines are for the electromagnetic field. Slightly enriched oxygen, only slightly. Slightly enriched carbon dioxide.